My name is Emma. I am 29 years old now, living in a small coastal town in Ireland, where the wind carries the salt from the sea, and everyone knows everyone's story. When I was younger, barely out of school, I believed life would unfold like the fairy tales my grandmother used to tell me. I would find love, build a home, raise children with a man who adored me, and grow old watching sunsets from our porch. I believed love could conquer anything. Life taught me otherwise. I met Daniel when I was 24. He was 27, a fisherman's son with hands rough from work and eyes the color of the autumn sky. He worked at the local bookshop, which seemed ironic for someone who rarely read. But he had a way with customers that made them smile. We met at the Harvest Festival when he accidentally spilled cider on my new dress. Instead of being angry, I laughed. He spent the rest of the evening trying to make up for it, bringing me paper napkins and telling terrible jokes until my sides hurt from laughing. We began seeing each other regularly. He would wait outside the primary school where I taught, leaning against the old stone wall with wildflowers he'd picked on his walkover. We would walk along the cliffs, talking about everything and nothing. He told me about his dreams of opening a small cafe, and I shared my plans to write children's books someday. After 6 months, we moved into a tiny flat above the bakery. The walls were thin, the heating barely worked, but we were happy. Or I thought we were. The morning I discovered I was pregnant, the rain was hammering against our bedroom window. I had been feeling unwell for weeks, attributing it to the stress of the new school term. When the second line appeared on the test, my hands trembled so violently, I nearly dropped it. I sat on the cold bathroom floor for an hour, trying to imagine our future as 3 instead of 2. When I told Daniel that evening, his face went through a series of transformations. Surprise, fear, and finally something that looked like panic. He paced our small kitchen, running his hands through his hair repeatedly. He said he wasn't ready, that we were too young, that we had no money saved. I tried to reassure him, told him we would figure it out together, that people had been having babies in difficult circumstances since the beginning of time. He nodded, but his eyes were already somewhere else, already leaving. The leaving happened gradually, then all at once. First, he started working extra shifts. Then he began sleeping on his friend's couch, saying our flat was too far from the harbor where he'd found work on the fishing boats. His belongings disappeared piece by piece, until one morning I woke to find his key on the kitchen table, and nothing else. No note, no explanation, just the brass key catching the weak morning light. I moved back to my parents' cottage on the edge of town. My mother held me while I sobbed into her shoulder, my body shaking with the force of abandonment and fear. My father, a man of few words but infinite kindness, simply started preparing the small room next to mine, painting it soft yellow without asking what color I preferred. He knew it didn't matter. Nothing much mattered then except the life growing inside me. The months passed in a blur of morning sickness, swollen feet, and sleepless nights. I continued teaching, smiling at my young students while my back ached and my heart felt hollow. The other teachers were kind but careful, their sympathy mixed with relief that it wasn't them. The children noticed my growing belly and asked innocent questions that cut deeper than they could know. On a bitter February night, the contractions started. My mother drove through the storm to the county hospital while I gripped the door handle and tried to breathe through the pain. 16 hours later, Oliver arrived, screaming and perfect, his tiny fists waving at the world as if he was already fighting. When the nurse placed him on my chest, still slippery and warm, I felt my broken heart restructure itself around this small, fierce creature. The early months were a haze of exhaustion. Oliver had colic and cried for hours every evening. I walked endless circles around our small room, bouncing him gently, singing lullabies my grandmother had sung to me. My mother helped during the day, but the nights were mine alone. Sometimes I cried along with him, our tears mixing as I held him against my chest, both of us lost in our own distress. When Oliver was 4 months old, I saw Daniel at the market. He was buying apples, examining each one carefully as if it was the most important decision he'd ever make. He saw me, saw Oliver sleeping in the carrier against my chest, and his face went pale. He turned and walked away without a word. I stood there among the vegetables and fresh bread, feeling simultaneously invisible and too visible, wanting to scream at his retreating back, but staying silent for Oliver's sake. Returning to work was both a relief and an agony. My mother watched Oliver while I taught, and I spent every break expressing milk in the staff bathroom, missing him with a physical ache. The children in my class seemed impossibly loud and energetic compared to my quiet baby. I smiled and taught and marked papers, while my mind was always partially elsewhere, calculating feeding times and wondering if he was crying for me. Oliver's first word was "Mama," spoken on an ordinary Tuesday while I was folding laundry. He looked right at me and said it clearly, as if he'd been practicing in secret. I dropped the tiny sock I was holding and scooped him up, covering his face with kisses while he giggled. That night, after he was asleep, I sat by his crib and whispered all my hopes for him into the darkness. By the time Oliver turned 2, we had found our rhythm. He was a curious child, always pointing at things and making questioning sounds. He loved books already, would sit in my lap for hours while I read, his small finger following the pictures. He had Daniel's autumn eyes but my stubborn chin, my mother's gentle nature, but my father's quiet strength. He was becoming his own person, separate from the circumstances of his beginning. When Oliver was 3, we finally got our own place, a tiny cottage near the school where I taught. It needed work, with drafty windows and a temperamental boiler, but it was ours. My father helped repair the roof while Oliver watched, fascinated, from his perch on my hip. That first night in our own home, I made Oliver's favorite pasta, and we ate it sitting on cushions on the floor, pretending we were having a picnic. He fell asleep in my arms, and I carried him to his new room, painted the same soft yellow my father had chosen years before. Now Oliver is 5, starting proper school next month. He wakes early, padding into my room with his stuffed rabbit trailing behind him, climbing into my bed for morning cuddles. He asks endless questions about everything: why the sky is blue, where the stars go during the day, why some children have fathers who live with them, and some don't. That last question still catches in my throat, but I've learned to answer simply and honestly. Some families look different, I tell him, but what matters is the love. Last week, Oliver drew a picture at school of our family. It was just 2 figures, a tall one with long hair and a small one holding her hand. When his teacher asked about it, he said matter-of-factly that this was his whole family, him and his mama, and that was perfect. The teacher told me this with tears in her eyes, but I didn't cry. I've learned that our small family of 2 is not lacking anything. We are complete. Some evenings, after Oliver is asleep, I sit in our small garden and think about the life I thought I would have. The phantom presence of what could have been sometimes sits beside me, but it no longer brings pain, just a mild curiosity about paths not taken. I look through the window at my son's room, see his nightlight casting soft shadows, and feel a love so fierce it takes my breath away. Daniel has never asked about Oliver, never sent support, never acknowledged the child we created together. The anger I once felt has faded to indifference. He is simply a stranger who happens to live in the same town, someone whose presence no longer has the power to wound me. Oliver will ask more questions as he grows, and I will answer them truthfully, but gently, helping him understand that his father's absence is not about him, not a reflection of his worth. My life did not unfold as I planned. There is no cottage with a porch for watching sunsets with my beloved. There are no siblings for Oliver, no father to teach him to fish or ride a bike. But there is this: morning cuddles and bedtime stories, first days of school and scraped knees kissed better, Christmas mornings with just the two of us but somehow perfect, sand castles on the beach and puddle jumping in the rain, his small hand in mine as we navigate the world together. I am Emma. I am 29 years old. I am a teacher, a storyteller, a keeper of dreams, and mender of nightmares. But most importantly, I am Oliver's mother. And that, I have learned, is more than enough. It is everything.